All right, welcome to the hotkeys. So in this tutorial, we're going to cover all these Maya hotkeys that I have listed here in this PDF. And there's not that many. There's a whole lot more hotkeys for Maya, but I just included 2 pages here to kind of get you started. So we'll cover mouse navigation first. This is sort of the basics of 3D navigation. You basically choose the Alt Option key with the middle with the mouse, basically. So either left click, right click, or middle mouse button to basically do these. And we'll jump into Maya here and show you how this works. So let's go ahead and click on a poly cube here in the poly modeling shelf just to see it here. And if I hold down the Alt key and left click, I rotate. And if I actually, let me bring up the keyboard just to show you where that's at in the pictures. So I have this control keys screenshot here. So you see here I've got Control, Shift, and Alt. And it's the Alt key. It'll be an Option key on the Mac, the blue here. That'll be the key that you would hold down during this process, okay? So again, you hold the Alt key with one hand. With the other hand, left click to rotate around. Right click is to zoom in and out. It's a nice smooth zoom. Now if you hold down the Alt key with the roller of the mouse, you'll have a more jagged zoom. But if you actually hold down the middle button down, like physically down, you can pan sort of up and downwards. So this gives you control in terms of the movement and how you move around the object. Okay. Now let's look at some other hotkeys here. So we'll jump over to the hotkeys here. So the viewport. So we have the framing of objects. The A for frame all objects in a scene, and then you have your 4, 5, 6, 7, which is the different viewports, which we'll cover here right now. So I'm going to go ahead and add a few more objects in the scene here, just so we have a couple to choose from. And then I will add maybe a sphere. There we go. So if I have 3 objects in my scene here, and I drag over all 3, by selection like that, I can rotate and it kind of pivots around the center of all 3 of those. But if I want to just frame on one object, I can select one object and then hit the F key, and that will kind of reposition the camera where I rotate around that one little area. So I'm now zoomed in on this one object here. But if I want to go back to my whole scene, I can hit the A key, and that will frame in all my objects in my scene. So if I have an object, like I'll make a copy of this by hitting Control D, and I'll zoom out way out here and bring it way up there. So watch what happens if I select this cube, hit F, I frame in on it, and then I want the whole scene. If I hit the A key, you'll see I zoom all the way out to here because this one object is way out there. So just be aware of that. So again, I'll hit A, and I'll frame in on these 3 here. So A and F are cool little hotkeys to get to know. Now, the 4, 5, 6, 7. 4 is for wireframe, and this basically shows the actual polygons, the separations of the units, and it's sort of see-through transparency here. I'm going to turn off the grid just so it's a little less distracting there, so you can kind of see it a little easier. 5 is a shaded, what's known as shaded solid mode, and it kind of gives you an artificial kind of light to give you a little bit more of an indication there. And then 6 will give you textured, and 7 will give you lighting. Now I don't have any textures in this scene right now, but if I select this object here and right click on it and assign a new material here, let's see, I'll go to Maya surface, and let's see, I'll add a blend. And then in the blend material here, I'm going to, let's see, there it is, blend tab there. For the color, I'm going to click in here, and I'm going to add a checker pattern here. So this is an actual texture material. So if I go back to 4, go to 5, you'll see it's shaded solid. As soon as I hit 6, this is now a texture. Okay, so 4, 5, 6, the texture material applies. And then 7's for lighting. So right now it's all black because there's no lighting in the scene. But if I add a light here, and I can go to the Arnold tab here and maybe add a, let's see. Actually, I'll just go to the Create menu, Lights, and we'll just do a directional light. I'll kind of scale it up big. And you can kind of see it here. the direction it's going. Move it up a little bit, move back. Now this is infinite light, so when I hit number 7, you can kind of see here how it's kind of interacting, and I can hit E to rotate, and it's a little interactive here. You can kind of see it moving around here. So again, those are handy little hotkeys. They're just the numbers. 4 again for wireframe, 5 for shaded solid, 6 for textured, and 7 for lighting. Now, one thing I do like to add on here, if you go to the shading menu right here, I like often to add, where is it here? It is wireframe unshaded. I often like that because what it'll do is it'll maintain the actual structure of the polygon so I can see it along with that. So this is very useful when you're doing modeling to actually see that wireframe, especially when you're on shaded solid and you deselect the object, you can actually still see the individual polygons. Some people don't like that, so they like to turn it off. You can also see it right here, this little icon, the wireframe unshaded, so you click this little icon. These basically show the same little icon, so this one here is the wireframe, this one is the shaded solid, this one is, let's see, I think that one is shaded solid, this one's textured, this one's lighting, and then here's the wireframe unshaded. So you can click on these little icons if you prefer versus the hotkeys. So just another little area to find that out. Okay, let's go to some more hotkeys, check it out. So we've covered the whole viewport. Let's cover the transform and the select stuff. So you have, this PDF's kind of rolling here. Okay. Transform. It's right on the edge there. Okay. You have control plus or minus to decrease the transform tools. I'll show you that. Q is to select objects, and the WER, which is to move, rotate, and scale. And then you have Control D and Shift D, which are useful for duplicating and duplicate and transform. So I'll demo those real quick. All right, so we select an object. If you hit Q, it's this tool at the top, which is the selection tool, right? That's Q. W is the move tool. So move tool, you can move in X, Y, and Z along these arrows. If you click in the middle here, you're moving all 3 axes, which if we click on the channel box here, you can see these values here are being changed as I rotate, basically move this around in space, actually translate, not rotate. The next one is rotate, which is E. It's this little guy here, and if I click on it, notice the value of X rotation change. So any of these lines here I can just click on. And if you want to rotate individually, click on an actual thing there and like middle mouse and drag, and you can change the value that way, which is kind of fun. And then there's R, which is for scale. So if I click on the middle cube, it scales uniformly. If I grab any of the other cubes, it squishes essentially the form. So any of these I can squish, squash, or scale uniformly. And if you ever want to reset these values, you can highlight in the channel box here. All the translate and rotate values should be a value of 0. And then your scale value should be a rotate of 1. And that will bring you back to the center here. Again, if I want to move it out, though, I can just drag it out like so. Let's just double check that I didn't miss anything. So we have, let's see. We have whenever QWR, the Control D and Shift D, and then the Control minus plus. So if you look at this navigation tool here, if I hit the plus key on it, it'll kind of make it bigger. So it comes out further, or if I hit the minus, it'll make it smaller. So if your navigation tool isn't big enough, hit the plus key and you can make it a little bit bigger. Okay. Be wary not to go too big though. I have noticed when it's out like this, it's kind of harder to kind of grab the parts. It's a little bit better when it's a little bit further in. Something like that looks pretty good though for the navigation, for the translate tool, I'm sorry. And then the Control D and Shift D, let's explain what's going on there. So I'll create another cube here. This one I will squish and stretch out. See, I feel like this is out a little bit too far, so I'm going to hit one more minus. There we go. I essentially want a plank here. And with any object, you can do this. You can hit Control D, and that makes a copy of this. And then you can move it up and move it forward. and you'll see it there. Now you can see this in the outliner here, that the cube basically is being duplicated. So if I hit Control D again, you'll see it says cube 4. It was cube 3, and I can move it up and move it over. Now what's really cool is if I hit immediately Shift D, it'll repeat the same action I did before, but it didn't do it right. So let me delete the first two here. Select this object again. We'll do it one more time. We'll hit Control D, move it up, move it over, and you don't want to release it. It's very important to do that, not release it. And then you hit Shift D, and that will essentially repeat like a staircase along here, which is kind of cool. So duplicate and transform essentially is what's going on. All right, let's look at some more hotkeys. So we went over all the, let's see, transform and select. We went over that. Let's go down the next grouping. So we have the modeling tools, and then we have animation and saving files. So let's go over the animation and saving files real quick, and then we'll go back to modeling. So with saving files, you can hit Control S or Command if you are on a Mac. Looks like I didn't put Control here. This should be Control S to save files, not Command S. I'll have to update that. And on a Mac, it would be Command S though. So I did work in a Mac lab for a while there. So if I wanted to save this file, I would hit Control S. But since I've never saved this file, it would open up the Save As menu, and then I would save it, and basically it would be good to go. So yeah, that's it for the saving. Then if you have Command Shift S, it'll save the scene for the first time. But since it's never been saved before, it's also going to do that. So really, this is negligible. I'll redo this in the PDF. So then you have animation. We have with objects selected, hold the S key to create your keyframe, and then you can hold over the keyframes with the Shift key to move keyframes in the timeline, and then you can right-click over highlighted areas of keyframes to adjust tangents, curves, copy frames, and so forth. So I'll demo that real quick. This is kind of fun. So I have animation. I have 120 frames here at the bottom. So to animate an object, it's very easy, actually, the basics of animation anyways. So all I have to do is hit the S key that starts the initial frame. So if I move in time, so I'll move to frame 32 here, and then I move the object forward, and then hit S again, I have create animation. And as I scrub backwards and forwards, you can kind of see it there. And you'll see in the translate forms here, you get this red line that goes all the way down. That means there's a keyframe on all those frames. Now in between here, I can move it up and hit S, and then I have a keyframe, so it goes up and down. In between there, I can hit E for rotation. I can rotate it, and then hit S, and it will also do the same thing. Now, I'm not even have to do S because I have auto key on. I didn't notice I had that on, so I'll turn that off for a second here. You can see here it's rotating in its position. So if I do want to do something different, like I want to scale it up like that, notice the keyframe doesn't automatically appear here without auto key. So I'm going to hit Control Z to undo that. If you do toggle this auto key little knob here, this little icon here, it will basically remember any action that you've done once the initial key is done. So now when I scale it up, you'll see it goes down and up, and all those in-between frames are kind of done automatically, which is pretty cool. So I could spin this, and I could move it way over here, for example, and all that would be automatically animated. Pretty wild, right? So if I want to make this longer between here and here, I can hold Shift key, drag over that frame, and then reposition it back further, click out, and now it's a longer distance to get from there to there. And then if I hold Shift over that keyframe, right click, here's all the different things you can do with it. So you can copy the frames, you can delete them. Here's where all the tangents you can do to change the way the actual animation zooms in and out, basically. So there's lots of little options in there for that, and that's basically it. So let's go back. So we covered animation, we covered saving files. So now we'll go to the modeling objects. So you have the extrude tool, which is probably the most common, the Control E. And then if you hold down and right click on the mouse on an object, you can enter in component mode. And then you can right click and go into exit mode. You can tap spacebar to go into the 4 views for modeling. I'll kind of show you that. And then move cursor to any view. You can tap spacebar to maximize the view. So that should really be under navigation. Maybe I should move that over the spacebar. And then hold shift key to select any additional vertices, and then you can hold the control key to deselect things. And then to select edge loops, you can hold down the shift key and double click on a vertex, edge, or face. So let me show you some of that stuff. Excuse me. So the first thing, so let's say I select this object here, and if I right click on it, I get the components here. So you have vertex, edge, and faces because this is a polygonal object. So I can choose face, and I can click on a face, and I can use that hotkey of Control E to extrude, and grab this blue arrow and pull it out, and I essentially extrude geometry. Now I can click on one of these and then hold the Shift key and select every other one if I want. So I've selected 3 of these. And then if I hit the G key repeats any previous action. It's like a master key. I can pull these guys out like so. Now, if I want to select multiple things in a row, it can be kind of interesting with vertices or faces. But let me select vertices here. You can drag over all these verts. You can see here, and you can do this a little easier in the 4 views. So if you tap the space bar, you can go to these different views, and so you can tap spacebar to maximize any of the view. Just move over, tap spacebar, move over, tap spacebar, right? If you hold down the spacebar, you get this hotkey menu set. I don't recommend using this as a new user, so just remember to tap spacebar. If you accidentally click on some stuff, I can walk you through on how to change things, but you can see in this top view, it's much easier, especially when I'm in wireframe mode. I can grab all these verts right here very easily, and then do other things with them. So maybe I want to, I don't know, pull them out further and make this object thicker, for example. Right now, let me go to the sphere here and I'll hit the F key to select it, and I'll go into component mode. Now, if you shift click and then you shift double click on the next face, you'll get an edge loop. So you'll get an entire edge loop, which is really nice. Or if you click on one of these faces, and then you go to the next one, and then you basically double click here, it'll select the faces in between. So you can do the entire loop, which goes all the way around, or if you want just a few of them, like if I want just these 3, double click here by holding shift, click, and then double click. And so all those are selected, and I can hit Control E, and I can extrude out some, pretty interesting geometry there. Anytime when I go out of component mode, right click, go to object mode, and I'm outside that back to component. So let me just double check. Exiting and entering component mode. The 4 views of the spacebar we covered. Covered that. Let's see. To deselect we didn't cover yet. We did add selections by holding down the shift key, but we didn't deselect using the control key. And then we use the double click to get the edge loop, and we use the Control E. So I'll just show you the deselect part. So if I go into face mode and say I select all these faces, right? I got a bunch of them there. I can hold the Control key and I can deselect a couple of them. So if I want to deselect just those 2, or if I want to deselect a loop, I can double click that loop and I get that whole loop, or Control and double click in between, I deselect those. So you can see there, if I hit now Control E and push that out, you'll see here I get some really distortion, but these areas are not selected, right? In fact, let me undo that action there. The other thing you can do is I can control and drag over that, and that will actually, let me undo that. If I hold shift and drag over it, it'll invert the selection, which is kind of nice. So just some funky little hotkeys, but now if I wanted to hit Control E, only these specific things that I had originally deselected would extrude out from this form here. So that's it, I believe, for the hotkeys. Yeah, it's a lot of stuff for the hotkeys here. Here's the G key right there that I talked about repeating the last action. So if you save the file, if you hit the G key again, it will save it again. So it's not going to really change much in that process. I will change this though. This should be, since everything else is pretty much set for a Windows machine, I'll change this to Control and Control. But it is correct for a Mac, so just understand they use Command key instead of Control key. All right, so I hope you enjoyed the little breakdown of hotkeys. You can also create your own hotkeys if you really get into it. That's under, let's see here, Settings and Preferences, Hotkey Editor. So you got a Windows, Settings, Preferences, Hotkey Editor. And then you would have to choose a category and basically create your own hotkey here. But that's, I'll go ahead and close that out. We don't need to see that right now. But you can override some hotkeys. So anyways, that's it for hotkeys. Until next time, cheers.